Okay, this is a note reading tutorial. Perhaps you don't have a lot of theory knowledge and music experience reading for an instrument or so on, and you need a kind of a brush up on how to read notes and maybe write them as well at the same time. So this video is for you. All right, so note reading. We have a variety of different instruments we could be reading for. If we are playing high instruments like a flute, that's supposed to be a flute there. Anyway, that's considered a high instrument. A trumpet as well would be considered a high instrument. And then the high end of a piano as well, right? So we have a piano keyboard here. Those are higher sounding instruments. The piano is kind of special because it also sounds low in the lower end. So those instruments are all using something called a treble clef in front of their notes. So we would draw this treble clef right here on the staff. And that tells us that these notes are probably going to be higher than a lower sounding instrument. All right, so far so good. Now the thing is that there's these 5 lines right here, and we need to know what they're all called. So I'm going to go up here just in the blank space, and I'm going to draw a bigger version of those 5 lines, so they're a little bit more spaced out. And we would number these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the bottom up. So if we refer to the 3rd line, that's obviously the middle, but if we refer to the 4th line, it's the 2nd from the top, because we're counting from the bottom up. So far so good? Great. Now there's a quick way to remember what these lines and spaces are called. So if a note is on this bottom line, that's an E. But we have some words and sentences that can help us remember that. So I'm going to write the first letter of each of these words. And this is the most kind of common phrase out there, and you may have heard this before. Every good boy deserves fudge. Okay, so whenever a note, I'll just draw these 5 lines here again. Whenever a note in the treble clef is on one of those lines, like this one here, we would say that's a D because it's on the deserves line, the 4th line from the bottom. If a note is up here, it's F for fudge. All right, so far so good. But we also need a way to tell, like, how do we remember these spaces? That's the space in between these lines, because notes can be there too. So we have the word face for that. All right, so whenever a note like this one here is in the top space, that's an E for the last letter of face, and so on. All right, so those are sentences that you can remember to help you read these. However, I just want to point something out, that these notes, as you go up, you'll notice that, let's see if hopefully you can see this pointer here. So when this is an E, right, the bottom line, and if we go up to the space after, it's F, just the next letter in the alphabet. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Oh, what do you mean by so on, Mr. Macchio? Well, we mean that these notes can go above and below these lines. These are just some of the guidelines, but we can go up and above and below. Oh, how do we do that? Well, if I had an F right here on this top line, my next note would be a G on the space. My next note's going to be a line, because it always goes like line, space, and so on. So I need to be able to write a line right here, and we space it out kind of the same, well, actually the same spacing as the other lines, and now I can write my note so that it sits there. Because otherwise I would have this note that's just dangling and floating in midair, and we wouldn't know what line it's supposed to be on. So we put a line through, and that line there is called a ledger line. And I can have a space note on top of that. And then watch what happens here. If I wanted the next note, it would have to be on 2 lines above because we're continuing up. Now you can keep on going and keep on going. The thing is that you rarely see more than, let's say, 3 ledger lines and so on. So this was an A here because this was fudge, F, G, A, B, C, and so on. Well, the same thing is true at the bottom here. Let's just delete this note. If the line note here is an E, the next note would be on a space, D, and now we need to draw equally distanced another line and put a note there, and that's our C. The space below is B, and so on. So you can go with ledger lines up or down above the staff. Great, so I would write these notes on a treble clef staff like this. And this is just something you're going to need to know how to do as you go through your music studies. So this is a quick kind of reference chart, and it's something that you're going to want to remember. All right, so far so good. We already said that we were dealing with high notes, but what happens if we're dealing with low instruments? Like, let's think of some low instruments. First of all, let's write low here. We can have the tuba. Bad tuba drawing, but you get my drift. Or the low end of a piano. That's anything on the left-hand side, right? And another low instrument would be a bass guitar. And so on. So those low instruments all use something called the bass clef. That's an aptly named clef because the bass clef represents more like bass notes. And now, naturally now, we have to learn new names for these lines. So instead of every good boy deserves fudge, we're going to use a similar sentence, but the bass clef, the bottom line starts with G. So we have good boys deserve fudge always. And for the spaces, there's not one single word like face in the treble clef. This one is all cows eat grass. I hope that's true. I would think that it's true of all cows, but there's got to be that one out there that is a picky eater. So a note here on this bottom line would be a G in the bass clef, of course. The top line up here would be an A, and so on. As for the spaces, a second space from the bottom there is cows for C, and so on, right? And the same thing is true in the bass clef. We can go above the bass clef and below by using our ledger lines if we needed to. Great. So let's go down here and just write the bass clef in front. And I'm just going to write a few lines and spaces here. Oops. Sometimes I'm going to zoom in here because it's easier to draw. But sometimes we do this kind of thing here. That's a bad example. Sometimes we do this. And I'm not too sure, is that supposed to be in the space or the line? So you have to make sure that the note doesn't kind of overlap the line if it's a space, right? It's going to be right here. So let's delete that first one. Zoom out, and I'll just quickly write A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and back to A, and so on. So again, you'll notice, just like in the treble clef, that these lines and spaces, as you go up, you're just going up the alphabet. Okay, so that's something that people don't always think about because we focus so much on these sentences like every good boy deserves fudge and all cows eat grass, or good boys deserve fudge always, and then we get mixed up, and then We don't think about logically, like if I just knew the bottom line in the bass clef here, which is a G for good, then if I go up, my next note is an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and so on. Okay, so I hope that this is a valuable tutorial for you. It's meant to be helpful to make sure that you are on track with your note reading and incidentally note writing. Thanks for listening.